Well, thank you very much for staying with us here on The Insight. And like I promised, I'll be giving you just some of the contentious tax proposals and everything regarding the Finance Bill 2023 in which you need to understand. Remember, like I said, the bill will be tabled in the National Assembly tomorrow, of course, for the second reading. As well, it is worth noting, like I said in the beginning of this particular bulletin, that the bill was firstly, or for the first time, tabled in Parliament on the 28th of April 2023. Now, since then, a lot has happened. The bill, as the public participation has been held by the Finance Committee led by Molo MP Kimani Kuria, who, after that, of course, they proceeded to draft their report or their recommendations. And a lot of lobby groups and those who presented their views before this particular committee, of course, rejected the proposals. Now, President Dr. William Samoei Ruto has been on the forefront championing for the approval of this particular finance bill, despite the punitive tax proposals like the Azimio coalition led by Raila Odinga are terming it. Now, Rigathi Gachagua on his part, the Deputy President, said that the bill will pass whether you like it or not. Now, tomorrow is D-Day in Parliament. The MPs will have their say. President William Ruto urged the MPs, of course, most of them allied to the Kenya Kwanza administration. We do know they have the majority in Parliament. They were urged by President Dr. William Ruto to support the bill. Raila Odinga on the other side told his MPs, you have no option. Reject the bill. Why? Because it not only ensures that the prices of common commodities skyrocket, but as well the economic situation in the country will worsen. What will the MPs do? We do have Kenya Kwanza members of Parliament like Githunguri MP, that is Gathoni Wamushomba, the former Kiambu County women representative, who said, I've spoken to my constituents and they've told me to reject the bill in totality. She belongs to the United Democratic Alliance party, or she was elected on the ticket of the UDA party, but what will be her vote when the bill is already, when voting will happen in Parliament? As well, the Leader of Majority, Kimani Ichung'wah, Molo MP, Kimani Kuria, on their sides, or on their part, as well, said they've liaised with their constituents, and of course, they've been told to support the bill. Now, I just want us to go through some of the proposals, or the key proposals, the contentious proposals in this particular bill. We do know that, of course, and I'll take you through this in slides. We'll begin with the first slide. And of course, the biggest concern is in regards to the addition of the VAT from 8% to 16%. And like you can see here, the proposal in the finance bill, of course, the proposals in the bill indicate that the VAT will be increased from 8% to 16%. Now, that is double than how it has been currently. Of course, apart from the addition of that, here's what would say or term as a reprieve, because the 8% on VAT on LPGs had been removed. Now, what do you get from this? The supply of LPGs, of course, would fall in the tax-exempt category, and of course, removing it from the current status, which, of course, is VAT-able. And of course, this, in the end, and this is why I said it is some sort of a reprieve to Kenyans, because it will reduce the price of LPG, of course, liquefied petroleum products. One other thing worth noting in this particular bill, and as well, like you can still say, is that the bill has proposed to delete the threshold that required non-resident farms to register for VAT if the annual turnover exceeds 5 million. Now, what that particular phrase that I've just read means is that all providers of imported services must now register for VAT. Now, Raila Odinga says, and of course, many Kenyans, including those in lobby groups or individuals who appeared before the finance committee led by Molo MP Kimani Kuria, decried that the 8% added on the current 8% VAT will increase the cost of living. Now, I want us to go back to 2022, particularly in June. Now, that will take us to our second slide. I want us to look at the prices of certain commodities then as compared to now. Now, that was 2 months before the general elections. And I'll take you, for example, maize flour. 2 kg maize flour in June 2022 was around 230 on average. At the moment, it's around 235.87 shillings. That is Kenyan shillings. Sugar, 1 kg of sugar was costing around 129.59 in 2022 June. Currently, it goes for around 193.61. 1 kg of potatoes last year, 1 year ago, was going for 89.10. Currently, it is going for around 107.98. Safe to say, it is an increment of around 18 shillings. Electricity, of course, 50 kilowatts, would cost you 796.83 shillings. At the moment, it's almost double. And now you'd have to part with around 1,326.53. Now, finally, petrol, because the VAT, of course, from 8 to 16% is on petroleum products. 1 liter of petrol last year at such a time would have costed you, or was costing 150.94 Kenyan shillings. At the moment, it's around 183.29 on average, an increase of around 33 shillings. Now, here's the real deal. If this particular bill goes through, or if a majority of the MPs vote to support the bill, if you'd like, then the situation, like you can see currently in June, we are in June, to be precise, 7th of June. And that, or this here, is the price of these particular commodities based on these units. If the bill goes through, we do know that if that VAT is doubled to 16%, of course, the VAT on petroleum products, it will increase the prices of common commodities, thus translating to an increase, or, of course, the state of the economy worsening. Now, for example, if sugar, a kg, at the moment goes for around 193, if that bill goes through, you can only imagine the price of sugar. At the moment, if you go to the supermarket with 500 shillings, you can be certain that you'll only get 2 kgs of sugar and probably a carrier bag. That is how things are at the moment economically, before that bill goes through. Now, if it goes through, your guess is as good as mine. Now, on to our third slide. I don't want us to look at the various tax proposals. There is the VAT, increment of VAT from 8 to 16%, but there are other proposals, because we do know that the VAT increment on petroleum products has taken center stage. But there are other tax proposals in this particular bill. There we go. There is 12% tax on mobile money transfers. Now, directly, this translates to an increase in mobile charges. And of course, this applies across all telco operators in the country. As well, there is a 20% excess duty on mobile internet data. You'll be forced to pay more to use your phone and browsing whatever you want to browse, getting information on whatever you want to know. Now, there's a 35% tax on income above 500,000. This, of course, like I've said, applies to those who are earning above 500,000, an increase to 35%. Now, the last one here on this list is the contentious housing levy contribution. Employees will have to contribute 3%, and your employer will also have to part with 3%. That is according to what President Dr. William Ruto said. And before we go further, I want us to listen in to whatever President Dr. William Ruto had to say concerning the housing levy, specifically the housing levy. The President has been vocal ever since this bill was tabled in Parliament to today. During the national prayer breakfast, the President has been rooting for this particular bill, the housing levy specifically. Let's listen in to what the President had to say during this year's Madaraka celebrations in Embu County.
Our vision for affordable housing program is premised, firstly, on the objective of creating 1 million direct and indirect employment opportunities throughout every value chain in the housing development ecosystem. The objective of affordable housing is to increase the number of homeowners and to transition more Kenyans from rent-paying in informal settlements, in slums, and we have 1,411 slums in Kenya. We should transition those people, my countrymen and women, into homeowners. It is our collective responsibility to think about the 5 million young people in Kenya who today walk our streets, walk our villages, in our townships, in our markets, and yet they do not have an opportunity to deploy their energy, their knowledge, their education in making a difference in their lives and making a difference in our nation. It is also our responsibility to grow our manufacturing, because housing will make sure that our entire manufacturing value chain, from the cement in our factories, to the steel in our factories, to the doors and windows and hinges in our Juakali sector and our construction products industry, to the sand harvesters, to all the people who will be working in our construction sites.
Now, like you've heard Dr. President William Samoei Ruto, this particular housing levy or affordable housing project, which will be funded through this particular 3% from the employee and another 3% from the employer, will not only help in the building of these particular affordable houses, but as well create employment for the youth who will build these houses, and extending to various industries, the building industry, buying of cements and all that. But yesterday, when this PS for housing, that is Charles Hinga, appeared before the Finance Committee to give his final submissions before they drafted their report, Hinga hinted that there could be room for changes on this particular housing levy. Now, we don't know what the changes might be. That is before it is tabled in Parliament. Now, as well, some of what could be the changes probably will be a reduction of the percentage to be contributed by the employee and the employer from 3% to 2%. Now, like he explained, and like the president also said, you can get back your money after 7 years. And if at all, and it is also worth noting that if you want to withdraw your money from this particular, get back your money from this particular housing levy or contribution, then it will be taxed. Very, very important thing. Now, the big question here is this particular housing levy a tax or savings plan? And literally, if it is as approved and assented into law by Dr. President William Ruto, after 14 days, it becomes law, which will be taxed. But again, this is the concern, because they say this particular project is meant to help the hustlers, people with no houses. Now, what about those hustlers who do not have any income? How will they benefit from this particular housing project? Because you can't get a house if you didn't contribute. Then there is a missing gap on that particular housing levy. And like Charles Hinga said, MPs do have an opportunity to, of course, have some changes or draft, make changes to that particular housing levy contribution. Now, let's just move to our next slide, which also says there's the 5%, of course, with withholding tax on sales and marketing services. There's increase in turnover tax from 1 to 3%. Now, let me just give you the details here, because this means that, and just allow me to read this, the increase the increase in the gross sales tax from 1% to 3%. Of course, this is while roping in more micro businesses to the tax bracket by lowering the entry point to cover businesses with a turnover of 500,000 annually from the previous 1 million shillings. Now, on the upper band as well, the upper band has moved from 50 million shillings to 15 million shillings, which will see businesses with turnovers above 15 million pay taxes on profits. As well, there's the 30% tax of per diems and the 15% duty on betting and alcoholic products. That is where there's another bit of contention, because between 7 to 20% will be the excess duty on the amount of stake. If you do gamble, or if you do engage in gambling, you understand what I mean by stake. Now, if you don't, stake is the amount that you use to place a bet. If you're using 100 bob or 1,000 bob, that is what we refer to as the stake. Now, it will range between 7 to 20%. Now, and again, players in this particular game, for instance, are required to remit excise taxes within 24 hours. There is also the debate surrounding, cosmetic products, and they say hair, beards, human hair, wigs, false beards, eyebrows, eyelashes, and artificial nails will begin attracting excess duty at the rate of 5%. This is where you ladies come in. You're trying to beautify yourself. The nails, almost a huge percentage of women currently in the country do use that. Whether you're using the hair products, the nails, the wigs, but as well for men who are using the false beards. It's safe to say I'd be exempted from that. But you'll have to, of course, those who will be in that particular business will have to part ways with an excess duty of 5%. Now, these are just some of the other proposals, because many people have been focusing on the housing levy and, of course, the additional 8% on the VAT on petroleum products. Now, quickly, I don't want us to listen to Raila Odinga on what he had to say concerning these particular tax proposals, because we do know the Azimio coalition has, in totality, rejected these particular proposals. Let's listen in to what Raila Odinga had to say concerning the tax proposals.
About 4 things currently stand out in a payslip but typical employee in Kenya, whether in the public or private sector. There has been no pay increase in the last 5 or more years. At least a quarter, sometimes up to half of the salary, is consumed by taxes. Much of the salary is consumed by all sorts of loans. Much of the salary goes into the funding dead institutions like NSSF and NHIF, which in the end do not serve the needs of the employee. Now, unilaterally, Kenya Kwanza wants to raise the taxes from the current 30% to 35% on those earning 500,000 shillings and above. Direct taxation as a means of raising money usually has unintended consequences. The shock will be felt down the chain. Typically, a single payslip supports entire villages and communities in Kenya. As Kenya Kwanza reduces availability of local disposable income, it is inadvertently reducing local demand for goods and services.
That is Azimio leader Raila Odinga rejecting the proposals in totality. Like you've heard, his argument might makes a lot of sense. You cannot tax people without increase in their payslips. That can only but hurt Kenyans even further, owing to the fact or owing to the economic situation in the country. Now, away from those tax proposals, let's have a look at, because the budget is set to be tabled in Parliament on the 15th of June this month. That is on Thursday next week. That leads us to our next slide, because the finance bill is directly linked to the budget, which, like I said, will be read by the CS for Treasury Njuguna Ndung'u in the next week, to be precise, on Thursday. And this is on what I've termed as the key numbers. Now, the budget for the year 2022-2023 was 3.3 trillion. Now, the estimate for this year's budget, that is 2023-2024, is around 3.64 trillion, an increase of around 7% from last year's budget. Now, just to give you details on some of the sectors that the estimated budget, and of course the first budget under Dr. President William Ruto's first year in office, is that I've picked out 4 different sectors: education, agriculture, national security, and of course health. Now, in the last financial year, the 3.3 trillion financial year 2022-2023, education was allocated 544 billion. In the estimated budget allocation this year, it has been moved or has been increased to 588 billion. Fair to say, an increment of around 44 billion. Now, agriculture, because we do know President William Ruto was very vocal during the campaign period on matters of production. Agriculture, the allocation and estimated budget for this year's estimated allocation for agriculture in this year's budget will be 69 billion, an increment of 2 billion from last year's allocation, because last year agriculture was given around 67 billion Kenyan shillings. Now, matters national security. We know the government has been very, very vocal on enhancing security in the country. There is the Operation Commercial Walifu, like you had in your bulletin tonight, across the northern region, because that is the part that has been badly hit by matters in security. The budget last year was around 177 billion. This year, the budget estimated or allocation, the estimated allocation to the security sector is around 220 billion, an increment of around 33 billion. Finally, this is a debate surrounding healthcare in this country. There's a talk, surrounding the national government taking back health as a devolved function from the county government back to the national government. According to the estimations in this year's budget, health will be allocated around 148 billion Kenya shillings, up from 122 billion shillings from last year's budget. That is an increment of around 26 billion Kenya shillings. On to our next slide. And just so you know, from next week we'll be giving you, or of course we'll give you coverage, complete coverage of the budget reading process that will be done in Parliament by the CS for Treasury, that is Mr. Njuguna Ndung'u. Worth noting, by the way, that Kenya's debt stands at around 9 trillion. It has grown over the past 6 years from around 4 trillion to 9 trillion. And the annual repayment is around 1.7 trillion Kenya shillings. Now, the tax collections. In 2020-2021, total amount of taxes collected in that particular year, financial year, was 1.669 trillion Kenya shillings. In 2021-2022, the amount of tax collected, and by the way, KRA did hit a record 2 trillion, or did hit the 2 trillion mark. The collected amount of money collected as tax in that period was 2.031 trillion. Now, as at April this year, because we do know that the 2022-2023 financial year will lapse this particular month, but as at April, the amount collected was around 1.7 trillion shillings. Now, big deal here is President William Ruto gave the KRA, Kenya Revenue Authority, a target of 3 million, or 3 trillion in the next financial year. The reason as to I've brought this is that the financial year 2022-2023 is ending, and we are getting into the financial year 2023-2024. That is why I wanted you to know that the target for KRA is around 3 trillion. Last year, for the first time they did hit the 2 trillion mark. Now, well, this period, from here to here, around 2 financial year budgets, have them hitting the 3 trillion mark. Only time will tell. You do know that there's been change of guard at the Kenya Revenue Authority. And of course, President Dr. William Ruto was vocal in his first 2 months in office about what he wants from the Kenya Revenue Authority. And he gave them targets that he said they must do whatever it takes to achieve. Now, I want to take you to our last slide, because on the finance bill, there are various issues or various items that have been exempted from the VAT, value added tax. Diagnostics, they've been, falls under the category of those particular products that have been exempted from paying tax. Laboratory reagents, vaccines, both human and animal vaccines. Finally, aircrafts and spacecraft parts. Question is, can you be able to get yourself an aircraft? Answer is, from my end, I cannot. So this wouldn't really concern you, but vaccines, laboratory reagents in the health sector, very, very key concern, and of course, diagnostics. Now, as I wrap up this particular segment here on the Insight on Lookuptv, I want us to listen to Dr. President William Samoei Ruto on the voting of this particular finance bill in Parliament on Sunday in Narok during the Thanksgiving service of one of his cabinet secretaries, that is Soipan Tuya. Let's listen in.
Nimesikia ya kwamba kuna watu wanasema ati siku ya finance bill kila mjumbe ajulikane amefanya kazi gani ama amepiga kura upande gani. Mimi nakubaliana ya kwamba kila mjumbe ajulikane amepiga kura wapi. Mimi nangojea mbunge mwenye anaenda kupiga kura ati kupinga mpango ya serikali kuwapatia hawa vijana ambao waliwapigia kura ati ajira. I am waiting for the members of parliament who will go and vote against the plan to give these young people, majority of them, they are voters. I am waiting for them to go and vote against the employment of these young people. I am waiting for members of parliament to go and vote against housing that would give these people a chance to own a decent home with 5% mortgage when you yourself as a leader is getting a mortgage because of the taxes paid by the people of Kenya of 3%. Mimi nangojea wale wabunge watakuwa ukule bunge ni tuwaone kwa macho kwamba wao wanapinga ati ajira ya hawa vijana ambao waliwapigia kura. Wanapinga mpango wa manyumba ya hawa wangwana na 5%, ili hali yeye mjumbe anapata 3%.
Now, listening to President William Ruto, you'd think, depending on how you want to interpret it, it would look like a threat, if you'd call it that, to members of parliament, and directly translating to a threat to democracy. Our question is, will your member of parliament represent you in the National Assembly by airing your views, regardless to whether you support it or reject it, ahead of the tabling of the bill for its second reading tomorrow? We all know that this is a democratic country, but when you hear such sentiments from the head of state, the Deputy President himself, Rigathi Gachagua, talked about the bill will pass, whether you like it or not. And if it doesn't pass, then you might end up not getting infrastructure, road, or medicines in your local healthcare facility. The bill has gone through its processes to be tabled in the National Assembly tomorrow for its second reading. Safe to say the public have done their part through the public participation. Over to you, members of parliament. who, the majority, by the way, in the House, belong to the Kenya Kwanza coalition. During the campaigns, they talked about representing the hustlers and ensuring that they get to live or lead good lives away from the miserable lives that they've been leading. But as it stands, the situation has gotten worse than when they took over power. Your guess is as good as mine. We'll wait and see what the legislators will do tomorrow. If there will be amendments to particular clauses, for example, the housing levy, like, Charles Hinger alluded to, or not. Only time will tell. Thank you very much for joining me on this particular segment on The Insight here on Lookuptv, 7th day of June 2023. Be sure to catch us again tomorrow because we'll give you unrivaled coverage and analysis of the finance bill tabling in the National Assembly. To everybody who made this a success, you the viewer, to the team behind the scenes, Orondo, Sean, Josh, Alvin, my producer Nalema, and of course the digital team. Many thanks. See you again tomorrow. Do have yourself a lovely night, and like always, God bless.
We value your feedback.